Well, in Orange County, the ladies are still in London and still reeling from everything that went down the night before at dinner. At breakfast, Shannon says that she is over this shit and she does not owe anyone any more explanations, especially Tamrajudge, who was on her way to the spa with Katie. And Katie can't understand why it is that Shannon always gets up and walks away. She asks Tamra, why does she always freak out? Why can't she just sit and have a discussion? And Tamra says, that's exactly why I had to walk away from her. I wanted her to take accountability for what she was saying. And then Katie says to Tamra, I don't really understand why she's getting a facelift if she's having trouble paying her credit card bills. And Tamra says that Shannon lives way beyond her means and that she throws money around like she's a multimillionaire. But she's not. Down at the pool, Jen asked Gina what happened last night and told her that she didn't even know she was leaving. Gina says that Shannon showed her a text from Alexis from years ago that literally and specifically proved everything that Shannon was saying. You know, the text from Alexis that said, we will be getting an attorney and we will be suing you. Jen is shocked and asks if Shannon sent that text to Tamra. And Gina says, yeah, she did, but Tamra hasn't said anything to anyone. And I just don't understand how she can sit across from Shannon, knowing that she is telling the truth and just calling her out for lying. Jen says, I've known Tamra for a long time and she loves a receipt, so I'm sure she knew about this. This is the stuff that makes her thrive. She's probably just keeping it a secret because she hates Shannon so much right now. Then Tamra says to Katie that Shannon's superpower is making people feel sorry for her. And Katie says, yeah, well, it works because I feel sorry for her. Up in the penthouse, Shannon and Emily are having breakfast when Heather arrives and walks in and says, listen, Shannon, I want to talk to you. I know last night didn't go well and I know you're upset. So let's talk. Let's fucking talk. Shannon tells Heather that she was blown away by what she said and she thought that the two of them were building trust. And that when they were in Sonoma, she made it very clear that she wanted that information kept between the two of them. And then Heather tells us what we didn't know until now, which was that information that Shannon so tearfully disclosed to her in Sonoma, she already knew about. And she knew about it because Tamra told her weeks ago. So she already had told people. And then she went on that radio show and she told the whole world about it. So Heather says she can't be upset because she's the one that did it. She's the one that put it all out there, not Heather. Shannon says, listen, it was a big deal to me that I opened up to you. And Heather says, listen, I understand that and I was there for you. But then when I heard you on Jeff's show, you just sounded so flippant about it. Shannon says, listen, if he's saying untrue things about me, I have a right to defend myself. And then Heather says, listen, but did you ever think about just maybe paying him the $75,000 and then just letting it die out? And then Shannon says, you know what? I'm going to go get them. The girls say, go get what? And she says, my papers. And then Heather turns to Emily and says, she sounds like my mom. My mom has a lot of papers. And then Shannon returns a minute later with a fistful of written receipts and she starts reading them off. $11,000 for flights, $600 for family dinners, $2,000 for a weekend getaway. As she's reading off these numbers, Heather and Emily are cracking up. I mean, laughing their asses off. I even heard Heather snort. And Shannon says, all of that totaling $60,891.40. And I'm glad you both find the humor in that. Back at the pool, Jen says to Gina, did you hear Heather last night say that she felt used? And Gina says, yeah, used? I'm not even sure what that had to do with her. Then Gina said, and I'm calling bullshit on that whole mammogram thing because she sent us text messages before we even went, saying that her family had a history of breast cancer and she didn't feel comfortable disclosing their information on camera. And Jen says, exactly. I would have never been so disrespectful as to bring it up after she specifically asked us not to. And Gina goes, I really don't know what's up with her. I also heard that she was saying a lot of things about that dress that you wore to the tea party. Apparently she was in Neiman Marcus, saw the dress and picked up the phone and called Tamra to talk about it. The two of them are wondering why you bought a $2,000 dress if you're having financial problems. And Jen says, that's such bullshit. But is it really? Then they cut to Tamra asking Katie if she knew that the dress that Jen wore was $2,000. And Katie says, actually, yeah, she called me that morning concerned about how much it cost. She was talking about taking it back, but I think Ryan convinced her to keep it. Tamra says that she's worried about Jen because she's a single mom, and if things don't work out with Ryan, and especially since there's already that tension in the house because of the FBI. And Katie goes, yeah, about that. What's going on? And Tamra goes, oh, I shouldn't have said anything, but his business partner is a bookie. And Jen and Ryan were constantly flying with him back and forth from the Bahamas to Las Vegas. And Katie says she's actually going to the Bahamas after this. Back at the pool, Jen tells Gina that Tamra actually doesn't even have the capacity to be a good friend. And says, and if the rest of you don't think that she's talking about you, you're wrong. Then the Duchess of Del Mar gathers her ladies in waiting and they all go for a ride on a double-decker. And when the ladies can't hear all the interesting nuggets that the tour guide is saying, Gina pipes up and says, I'll say something interesting. Heather, I don't really understand that whole mammogram thing that happened last night. And Heather says, what don't you get? And Gina says, obviously I felt really bad for you in that moment, but I don't understand because before we even went, you sent us all a text saying that you didn't want to talk about anything on camera. And Heather says, that was my family's information I wasn't willing to discuss. I was more than happy to discuss mine. And then Shannon says, listen, we all feel really bad, but we assumed everything was fine because if it wasn't, we would have heard something. Plus, we heard the cheering coming from the room. And Heather says, we could keep couching this about what I texted you or how you felt, but the truth is 4 girls were in that room and not one of you turned to me and nothing changes that moment. And Gina says, and that one moment was so much for you that you had to bring it up at dinner. And Heather says, oh my God, you're the one bringing it up today. I was done with it last night. And Gina says, well, I was affected by it. And Heather says, well, that's your problem. And Gina says, and why is it coming back to me in a way that's like, I'm not being a good friend to you? And Heather says to her, were you being a good friend to me when Katie came for me? And Gina says back to her, were you being a good friend to me when you were on Watch What Happens Live talking shit about my house? Then the ladies hop off the bus. Half of them go for chips, fries, and the other half go to taste fancy chocolates. Then Gina makes her way over to a grooming store because she needs to buy a gift for Travis, her boyfriend. You know, the one she claims to be broken up with. You know, Travis, who, according to Gina, has big balls, but little willy. Now we're at dinner and all the women order fillets, plus 1 Dover sole and a lot of onion rings. And right after Gina gives a toast, Jen turns to Heather and says, excuse me, Heather, I have a question. Did you have a problem with the dress I wore to the tea party? And Heather says, no, it was beautiful. And Jen says, did you call Tamara and talk about the price of my dress? And Heather says, I was at Neiman's and I saw that you bought a $2,000 dress and I know that you're only getting $6,000 a month. I was actually worried about you. And then they cut to Gina in confessional saying, ooh, she's been caught, she's been caught. But honestly, I don't think Heather calling Tamara about the price of that dress was wrong. In fact, I think that's about the right level of messiness that's perfect for housewives. Because who in their right mind wouldn't think that it's crazy for someone to spend $2,000 on a dress after hearing about those financial problems that she's been having? Then Tamara pipes up and says, Heather was actually looking out for you because she said she doesn't want you to feel pressured to spend a lot of money to keep up with labels. And Jen says, oh, well, last year when I was wearing fake labels, I got shit for that too. And then she turns to Heather and says, you walk in every day in head-to-toe designer. And Tamara says, because she can afford it. Heather eventually gives Jen a full-throated apology, and then Jen turns to Tamara and says, and I don't even know where to go with you. And Tamara says, I thought we were doing great. Jen says, no, we're not. All you do is come for my family, and I'm tired of it. Ryan's my partner, and what you say about him really hurts me. And then Shannon turns to Tamara and says, Tamara, I don't understand why you haven't said anything to anyone about that text that Alexis sent us. And Tamara says, that's between the two of you. Emily speaks up and calls bullshit on the whole thing. And then Shannon and Tamara go at it again. And in confessional, Shannon says, I don't know why, but I'm convinced that Tamara is trying to ruin this trip. And she is pissed. So the next morning, she goes to Jen and discloses all of this shit that Tamara said about Ryan and tells her that Tamara had a background check done on her. Jen is pissed, and the next morning, she takes Tamara's head off.